Okay. So in Kim's honor, I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of sorrow in this room. I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of love in this room too. And Gibran tells us that love and joy are two sides of the same coin. So we are going to lean into this love and joy, and we're going to lean into whatever happens today. This is as Kim would wish. So good evening all. It is my great honor to welcome everyone to this gathering of our dearly departed Kim Martyn. My name is Dee Robinson, and Kim was my mother-in-law. In a moment, I'll be calling up some friends and family, and of course her daughters, Emma and Kendra, to share some words in remembrance of Kim's life, but first a few memories of my own. To know Kim means to know her grace, her wisdom, and her passion in everything that she did. I've come to know Kim deeply over these past 7 years. She was and still is a dear friend of mine, notwithstanding my relationship to her daughter. She was always mindful and present. When with her, she truly listened, asked questions, considered different viewpoints, and ultimately gave thoughtful advice. We collaborated professionally and co-taught workshops at high schools. We discussed with young people the importance of healthy ideals of self, healthy relationships, consent, understanding oppression, and developing agency and advocacy. Privately, Kim also became a confidant who I would seek out for advice both personally and professionally. This is what I refer to when I say to know Kim is to know her grace, her wisdom, and her passion. And sometimes she would share all of that grace, wisdom, and passion with you, whether you asked for it or not. And I'm sure by the laughter, many in the crowd can attest to this. Kim's sometimes unsolicited thoughts often came to me in the form of emailed letters and articles covering a range of eclectic interests. I scrolled through a few of them yesterday. They included let the Canadian government know you stand behind the campaign for cannabis amnesty, Bell's outrageous plan to dismantle net neutrality, the problem with wokeness, and of course, please act now to save sex ed. She was always the activist. But one email really stands out above the rest. As many of you are aware, Kim's daughter, Emma, and I are expecting our first child. We're expecting that first child in November. This will be Kim's first grandchild, and this new addition to the family was a great source of joy and excitement for Kim. In 2015, Emma and I were searching for a home to grow into. For Emma, the home had to have a separate apartment so that Kim could move in with us if ever her journey with cancer required her to. For me, if we were buying a home instead of a condo, it had to have room for a hot tub in the backyard, and these were non-negotiable conditions. Of course, Kim's grace, wisdom, and passion about her future desire of becoming a grandmother was at odds with my non-negotiable condition. The collision materialized in the form of an email to me, of course, that read, "Hey Dee, this may be out of place, but please read this article. This is my protective mom coming out." The attached article was entitled, "Hot Tubs Hurt Fertility. University of California, San Francisco study shows." She would love that. She later, actually I heard from her friends that she had a number of conversations on this topic with many of her close confidants, and asked them whether she should invite me to dinner to discuss it further. And of course she did. Coincidentally, a year and a half later, I did have a fertility test, and could not wait to show Kim that my sperm count was normal, flying in the face of her peer-reviewed journals. So you can imagine the vindication and what a conversation that is to speak about your sperm count with your mother. So to leave you on a serious note, in her final months, Kim was taken by the writings and philosophies of Jack Kornfield, who asked the most pertinent of questions: did I love well? To determine whether we love well, he asked us, where do we put our time, our strength, our creativity, and our love? Does what we choose in our lives reflect what we most deeply value? Kim's grace, wisdom, and passion also led her to sharing truths and philosophies like these with me. These were also unsolicited, but they were deeply valued. If you look around the room, people outside, and some people kindly starting to leave to make space for her, you can tell that Kim loved very, very well. Kim put her time, her strength, her creativity, and her love into the people gathered here today, and many hundreds, if not thousands of others over the years. So let's keep her example present in your minds and hearts, and even in her absence, she leads us forward. At this point, I would like to call on, At this point, I'd like to call on one of Kim's oldest friends, Susan Gillespie, who flew from PEI to be with us in Kim's final days to present the eulogy.
We come together today to mourn the loss and celebrate the life of the remarkable spirit that was Kim Martyn, a mother, a sister, an aunt, a stepdaughter, and a friend of all of us here today. Her life was far more than the challenges she faced, but her essential character was revealed by her response to those challenges. Not a thought or word of self-pity. A quiet determination to adapt as necessary to endure. An abiding interest in her friends. A devotion to her daughters. And the strength to selflessly face and decide on her ultimate passing. Picture her in your mind. That fun-loving twinkle in her eye. Her ready smile, her distinctive laugh, her funky-looking style, her energy and her svelte brain. Hold those memories and treasure them. My memories of Kim date back to my early childhood. In 1959, when Kim was 2, her family moved to Howard Drive, joining my family, the Manions, and about 20 other families on the street. Howard Drive, now part of Midtown North York, was then the northern limit of Willowdale, with farmland beyond. The street was full of kids who lived outside, playing on the street and in the fields and never going home until the streetlights went on. It was a children's paradise. Kim built forts, saved injured birds, walked dogs, played hide and seek and cops and robbers, ran everywhere, and chewed enormous wads of bubblegum until her jaw ached. She was small, but she was mighty. She was the strongest girl in the street, a character trait that she maintained all her life. She was mischievous. From an early age, she discovered that I was easy to startle. She took advantage of this every chance she could get, and for the last 60 years, seriously, she jumped out from behind every wall, door, and bush that she could find so she could scare me. I know it's hard to believe, but it seemed to work every single time. And as a result, she never tired of trying me on. She loved every minute of it, whether I laughed at her or yelled at her. When we were about 12, Kim, Teresa Mannion, and I formed a group we called the Mangill Mars, short for Mannion, Gillespie, and Martyn. It wasn't a musical group or a dance group, it was just a group. We took it seriously though, and we divided our responsibilities among us. Kim was in charge of relationships, bracket male, Natural resources / environment. Foreign affairs, I think that means either Cuba or Denmark. Linguistics, go figure that one. NT. We knew most of her strengths even then. Throughout her life, Kim gave generously to charity and community. One of her early causes was the Miles for Millions walk to help alleviate third world hunger and poverty, which even then was meaningful to Kim. Walking the extraordinary distance of 40 miles and nursing the ensuing blisters were a piece of cake for her. Figuring out the pledges and taking the money to the bank, on the other hand, were a big challenge. That's where I came in as the man Gilmar in charge of finance. On Friday nights, there were movies or music at the Martyn house, with Big Brother Rob making popcorn. We learned to jive, and Kim's dad, Bob, taught us all his many dance moves, giving Kim her first taste of dance, a love that she would never lose. Throughout her life, Kim pursued salsa dancing, tap, swing, and jazz, and several years ago loved participating in a reenactment in Dundas Square of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Her love of rhythm, music, and community prompted her to join the drumming circle as well, which became a source of energy and human connection for her. Kim attended Earl Haig Secondary School. She was adorable, popular, outgoing, and no surprise, a big hit with the guys. She became captain of the cheerleading team, had a dance number in the school play, joined a Christian youth group, and started going steady with a boy. It was when she went on to York University, though, that she met Bruce. She looked into those blue eyes of his, and her world was never the same. It was the beginning of a lifelong love for both of them. After graduation, and while working in a group home as a counselor, Kim realized the direction that she wanted her career to take. She was inspired by her friend Sue Johansson, better known as the host of the radio talk show Sex with Sue. Kim enrolled at Ryerson and obtained a master's in social work, which enabled her to become a high-energy, enthusiastic, sexual health educator we all know and love. It was at Ryerson that she met 4 wonderful women who have been a force together ever since. For 38 years, up to and including this past June, these women met for dinner, friendship, and a few laughs every month, and have sustained each other through babies, jobs, life, and cancer. Kim loved her work and became involved in numerous ways. She worked at several birth control clinics, taught human sexuality at Seneca College, assisted in a Queen's University research project called Young Women at Risk, co-produced 2 videos for the Science Center on sexually transmitted diseases and myths about birth control, authored a book called All the Way, First Time, and assisted in writing a second book called Changes in You and Me for young people. In 1986, she became a sexual health educator for Toronto Public Health. She loved that role and the opportunity it gave her to teach the young and the not so young about healthy sexual practices and relationships. She was a speaker in demand and traveled to public schools, high schools, and as far away as Cambridge Bay, Nunavut to educate and answer. Kim had little interest in conforming and took delight in taking on the taboo subjects of the day, providing an arena for open discussion. It was certainly instructive when she explained to me that when you are standing in front of a full auditorium of teenagers and about to draw a penis on the blackboard, you only get one chance. Her very best and most rewarding work, though, started at the beginning of 1988, when 3 days in, when Riley was born, followed by Emma Irene 3 years later. Kim was a loving and dedicated parent, strict but playful and eager to participate. Many was the time that we were out with our young kids, trying to keep them happy in a public place, when out would come Kim with a handful of condoms. Because everybody knows what terrific and interesting balloons they make. She was direct, open and honest with her girls and my boys. They could ask her anything and she would always answer candidly and without embarrassment. No subject was off limits. It was just one of the many things the kids all loved about her. There was also her love of snakes, which most kids adored and some of us just tolerated. Kim tried to encourage a social conscience in those around her and demonstrated that in how she lived and the causes that she supported. So what do we learn from Kim and her all too short life? The importance of being there, the value of friendship, the power of openness and tolerance, that real love is unselfish and involves sacrifice and giving. Cancer did not scare Kim. She remained a buoyant spirit to the end, and she chose her end when she was ready. She leaves a legacy in her daughters, Kendra and Emma, who are beautiful, loving proof of the way that she lived her life. Helen Lowry Marshall wrote the poem Afterglow, which beautifully expresses wishes that I believe Kim also felt. It reads as follows. I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to have the afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times and bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun of happy memories that I leave when life is done. Hold your memories of Kim in your mind's eye and in your heart and treasure them. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was beautiful. Next up, I'd like to invite Kim's big brother, with even a bigger heart, Rob Martyn, to share a few words from himself and also Kim's younger brother, Stephen, who cannot be here today.
Thanks, Dee. You held that together pretty well, Susan. So yes, I am Kim's big brother. Not that she ever needed it. There was never a schoolyard occasion where I was supposed to take care of business, and I'm kind of glad because I wasn't up for taking care of business anyway. I just wanted to take a few minutes to share a few things from my final conversation with Kim, just a couple hours before she passed, and a final little text that she sent me from the cottage. She had been up the cottage with the girls and their partners for a couple of weeks prior to passing. I was sitting beside her beside her bed, and Susan was there, which was really a beautiful blessing for me, guys, because Susan, Kim, and I, and Teresa Mannion, who's also here, we go way back, we go back to the beginning. So Susan and Kim were joking about, following me. They were trundling off to kindergarten and following me to the school. It was a sweet little time just there with you, Susan and Kim. Susan, Teresa, and Kim were thick as thieves as kids and incredibly annoying as her older brother. I've grown to deeply love Susan and Teresa, but in those early days, not so much. So there's a few illustrative things that came out over the brief conversation I had with Kim that I thought kind of speak to who Kim was. I'll start with Kim's bossiness, and then I'll move to honesty and strength, and then to her humor, and then to her thoughtfulness. So illustrative of her bossiness. Early in the conversation, sitting there with Susan, and some of you won't appreciate this, but many will, she shared with me the following. Rob, so don't pick on Liz. And so Liz is my stepmother. Liz is about the single most assertive woman on the planet Earth. And for Kim to be entering the conversation by saying, so don't pick on Liz, I'm like, whoa, that's a good one, Kim. I assured her Liz and I had many sweet dinners together regularly, and all would be well on that front. But, Kim wasn't shy, as noted earlier, about giving people direction. With regard to her honesty and strength, which were boundless, and were my favorite traits of my sister. Halfway through the conversation with her, she talked about Howard, who was a dear friend. There. And she said, Rob, these goodbyes, they're really hard. I said to Howard, I'll see you, Howard. And I realized I won't see him. Howard and Kim were really tight. Howard was tight with Bruce and Kim. And just Kim's honesty, there just aren't many people, guys, that would be able to weigh into that. I told her I loved her, and she said, I know. And I said, I really love you, Kim. And she says, I know. I was shamelessly reaching in for her to say, I love you, But again, this time was so intense, and Kim's courage was so amazing. The goodbyes, it just was too much. I know Kim deeply loves me, and deeply loved me, and it just was too much to go there with me. I didn't go up and give her a final hug goodbye and kiss for the same reason. But her courage pulling that off, I think she loved me deeply. I mean, when we were young teens, she made every effort at one point to plunge a knife into my chest. So it's up for grabs. But, I think she did. She held court up in her room, running her life at the time of her death, just like how she lived her life. It reminded me of my mom. My mom was a fiercely independent woman for her generation and really strong. And Kim was every bit as strong. Our dear friend Teresa Mannion, I think I've been quoting Teresa for years. I hope she said this. She said, well, Kim's the daughter of a prairie girl. And she was the daughter of a prairie gal. My mom was from Regina, and they built them tough out there. And Kim had that, But she wasn't just tough. She remained thankful in a remarkable way during this past 10 years and all the tough times in terms of Bruce. That thankfulness is remarkable, guys. Scripture encourages us to rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. Kim's wisdom always kept her focused on being in a state of thankfulness. It was just so impressive. With respect to her humor, I teased her about, man, your grandchild is going to be so sick of hearing amazing stories about Kim. There'd just be so many from us all the time, Kim. And she laughed. And then as we were joking a little bit about that, I realized, she gave me a whole lifetime of laughs, Kim, because she never found my dad at all funny. And my dad was hilarious, but Kim never really thought he was very funny. And that only made the laugh way bigger for me. I mean, I thought Dad was funny, and then Kim not finding him funny, it just felt to get better. So thank you for that, Kim. Lastly, just her thoughtfulness. I wanted to read you a little text. So Kim was in rough shape up at the cottage. And she texted me a couple of times, and this was just kind of in the last week she was up there. It's just a short text. She said, so this was on July the 19th. Hope your weekend is restful, my brother. Quiet up here, so nice. I guess it was busy at the front end and it got quiet. And it just, think of all that's on Kim's plate at that point. And she's sending me a note about my weekend. Again, she's a remarkable person. She and Bruce both were very gracious and thoughtful. They were an amazing team, and they raised two amazing daughters. both of whom are supported by everybody here big time. Just to close, I'll read a note from Steve in a minute, but I wanted to make a special mention of Kim's sister. Do we have a slide there of, yeah, so that's my cousin Sodi, and Kim and I at my daughter's wedding a couple of years ago, and you might not have known Kim had a sister, Sodi. Sodi technically was her cousin, but really they were like sisters, and so was my sister, and there was a bond that ran so deep between Sods and Kim all the summers up in Muskoka. We lost Sods just recently also. But I just wanted to share, it's a great picture of the three of us. If I could read a note from Stephen, it's actually from Stephen, his wife Megan, and their 2 kids. Steve, as Steve said, wasn't able to make it here today. So Steve starts, Kim was like a second mom to me. She was always there for me, and in a continuation of that role, Kim was also a grandmother to our kids Oscar and Cedar. So much so, they actually called her grandma, until corrected many times for Kim's sake. I'm sure Kim wouldn't have liked the grandma thing. She was so kind and caring to them. You could tell they were precious to her. It was beautiful to see them grow up with Kim, fully embracing each of their stages, and such a gift that we all had these last years with her. I likely don't need to tell any of you that Kim was a strong, determined woman. But what she overcame in her life to become this way was not seen by most. What many of you might now know or remember, if you're old enough, was that Kim was brutally shy and a gentle soul. Like many natural performers, Kim had little fear of getting up in front of people to dance. But when she was young, you couldn't twist an opinion or a thought out of her, and she never spoke a critical word. But over the decades of her life, during her time with Bruce and after, she really came into herself, into her power. She was still never gossipy and confrontational, but grew into a very sage elder who did not hold back her advice, which was consistently compassionate and wise. To have Kim as my sister and a very close friend for my life has been such a gift to me. I will never know such an unconditional, loving, and caring relationship again. Thank you, Kim. You will always be with me and all of us. And then a quick note from Cedar, who's their young daughter. I really loved Kim. She was a great woman, like a peaceful, wise woman. I liked talking with her about stuff and going to the park and going with her to the sandy beach. I'm happy she saw me swim for the first time. Hug to Kim. And from Oscar, I really loved Kim. I had so many great times to get with her when I was 1 year old, and I'm now 10. Now she's gone free of her sick body, and I hope she's happy up there in the clouds, and I'm really going to miss her. And lastly, from Megan. And Kim and Megan were really tight. It was a lovely thing that Steve ended up with Megan. Thank you, Kim, for your generous caring of us. I carry a tremendous debt for your showing up and for your help. Thank you for your firm opinions and support of us, being who we are regardless of where we might not have agreed. Thank you for your compassion. I am endlessly thankful for the container you created to hold us through the daily grind of life and some of our hardest days. Showing up when Stephen was sick with Lyme and taking care of Oscar when Cedar was born, for creating safe space, a large dose of fun and good humor, for letting me know I'm loved and welcome in your family often, for always being open to learning and for being curious about how it is each of us move in the world. I'm sweating like my father would be sweating up here. Hold on 1 second. We're almost done, folks. Last paragraph. Yet again, for greeting death with grace, humor, and peace, for being at home for a day after you died so we could sit with you and thank you all over again for the gift of all you have been and will ever be to us. Kim, may you be dancing, may you be laughing with all the ones who have gone before you. I love you. We will remember you and tell stories of you. Your name will sing in our home for as long as we have voices to carry your song. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob. That was beautiful. I'm still awestruck at hearing Stephen say that Kim never spoke a critical word.
I can barely say it.
Learn something new every day, I suppose. Next up, I would like to invite Kim's close friends, known lovingly to us as the Ryerson women, Liz, Bettina, Joe, Lillian, whose friendship began while studying at Ryerson years ago and endures today. And these women have been a great source of support for Emma and Kendra and all of us. They're her warriors. They are willing to carry out whatever Kim wishes. If they got to get on stage and kick people out of a funeral, they'll do it. And we love them for it. Come on up.
It was much easier to kick people out than it is to speak out.
So, I'm Liz, this is Bettina, this is Lillian, and this is Joanne. And I'm going to start. So we're a group of friends who met at Ryerson in the early 1980s. And we've had dinner together monthly in each other's homes for 35 years. Or more. Thank you for that. The alphabet kept us organized while our lives played out around us. Our times together were always filled with sharing what was happening, seeking and offering insights and wisdom from each other. We celebrated life together, especially with lemon poppy seed cake. We welcomed children into the world. We supported each other with cancer. We helped each other when parents and partners died or were ill. Kim could keep us honest in our lives. She was honest and genuine and generous. Kim was ever the educator, as you've been hearing on and on, in teaching us about meditation, social justice, our bodies, and about sex in particular. We always felt like things were getting back to normal when we could stop talking about our problems and start talking about sex again. It was very important to Kim to leave a small footprint on the environment. We could count on Kim having the answers, and if she didn't know in the moment, she would find out. She was an amazing dancer, and she loved her chocolate. She leaves a big imprint on the people she touched. At the end of every dinner, we would look at each other and in some confusion would say, well, who's hosting next? And then we would start to laugh. We would start from the beginning, A, B, C, D, and then we'd get to J, K, L, and then another L, and then we'd get back to B. The alphabet kept us organized. We will always keep K in our alphabet. We know Kim will be a steady presence in our lives, and she leaves a heartbreaking empty space.
So, our last conversation with Kim was last Thursday. While we sat and held her hand, she was lying in her bed, sleeping off and on. And as we sat there with her, she opened her eyes, she looked at us, and she said, wait, am I the first one to do this? And we said, yes, you are, Kim. And there was a little pause. She opened her eyes again, and she said, but I thought I was going to be there to help you with this. And we said, but you are helping us, and you have.
and you will. Forever. Many years ago, Kim brought a copy of one of Thich Nhat Hanh's loving kindness meditations to one of our dinners. It's from the book Teaching in Love. She used it almost daily for many years, and we would like to take a minute now to share it with you. For each of us, may I be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. May I be safe and free from injury. May I be free from anger, anxiety, and fear. May I learn to look at myself with the eyes of understanding and love. May I learn to identify and see the sources of craving, criticism, and delusion in myself. And may I be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in myself. This she would want for all of us. Let's keep the spirit alive. For Kim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. So who hosts the K dinner?
Yeah, we can't even think about that.
It's a nice thought to know that that'll continue. It's a beautiful thing. A few more folks, a couple more people, and then some closing remarks. So next up to speak is Liba Spring, a colleague and friend of Kim's from Toronto Public Health. Liba.
I have to read this because otherwise I'll never make it through. I met Kim when she first joined the team of family planning community workers, yeah, that's the title, later known as sexual health educators and still later, promoters. I had already been at Toronto Public Health for a few years. Emma had not yet been born, so I guess it goes a ways back. I looked for and found the speech I'd given at her retirement and incorporated some of it into today's remarks. This will serve me well to stick to her work and not veer off into the personal, which will in turn help me not to choke up. Kim was the consummate educator, as you have already heard. But since her first career was in social work, she was able to combine these two elements to create a unique style, not only with teachers, students, parents, and other workshop participants, but also clinic. The style is perhaps a poor descriptor, but because what she brought to her work was both passion and compassion. Right into the microphone. You got the passion and compassion part, right? Well, all right. You'd think I'd be used to doing this, right? Because this is all we did for 30 years. In the years we worked together, I learned a lot from her, but we struggled over the best way to do the work. We argued about the utility of pamphlets, HPV vaccination, whether education could really prevent sexual abuse. She said yes, I said no. We always agreed on how important it was, though, to keep it real. Dictionary terms when appropriate, street terms when they were more so. She understood and valued kids' real experiences, which made her a great asset at Evergreen, Jesse's, and with what were known as Section 19 students. She found a way to relate to some really hard-ass kids. We sent each other articles and had endless conversations as we spent time together in and out of the office. Our fascination with our work had no bounds or boundaries. Kim was always ready to remind her friends and acquaintances about using condoms. Anyone would characterize Kim as always being up for helping others. She was the epitome of generosity. I'm sure you have already heard that term, and will hear it time and time again today. Kim took the trouble to learn ASL in order to have a more direct way of communicating with hearing impaired students. She thought nothing of going more than once up to Cambridge Bay, down to Saugeen, finding a way to relate to cultures so different from her own. Inevitably, she went that extra mile when she encountered young people there who needed more than a few workshops to find their way. Yes, she got personally involved. Are you surprised? We all know how resilient Kim was, and who has not benefited from her tenaciousness, perhaps pig-headedness is a more accurate term. She loved to find get-arounds with process. Even after I retired, I heard stories about her struggles to bring projects to fruition. Bureaucracy made her nuts. For example, her frustration with the school board and their refusal to teach menstruation in grade 4 led to my writing a blog about it. In fact, lots of my discussions with Kim ended up in my blogs. She was my sounding board. Kim is also known, as you've heard, for her public speaking following Sue, her longtime friend from North York Clinic days. She made many appearances on radio and TV. Sheila Rogers interviewed her about her book. She was a regular guest on popular morning shows on cable TV. Speaking of speakers, it was Kim who taught me that when a speaker is not hitting the mark, for example, at a conference, you just slip out the door. That she taught me that time is precious, and that's a very good lesson. Being a sexual health educator was never just a job for Kim. Once a sex educator, always a sex educator, no matter whether you're working, retired, on a plane, really, she did, really, or at a party. At our house parties, Kim would turn off the lights as I turned them on and light candles to create an atmosphere. This is job-related. Having created an intimate atmosphere, the next logical step was to put out a bowl of condoms next to the overproof rum on our kitchen table. Kim will always be remembered as a stellar example of what a sexual health educator should be: knowledgeable, compassionate, empathetic, and so very real. Toronto Public Health was lucky to have her, and we were all lucky to have her in our lives.
Thank you, Liba, and we were lucky to have you here to share her career. We appreciate that. Finally, the girls, and then a closeout. The girls are going to come up and share some words. Emma, her youngest daughter, and then Emma's real soulmate, Kendra Lee.
This is really hard, so we have a script, and we're gonna try and stick to it.
Thank you all so much for coming. We'd like to express, firstly, okay, now I got it. What a privilege it's been caring for Kim, and I acknowledge the network of friends and family who contributed immensely to her quality of life, especially in the past year.
The group known as the Ryerson Women, one of her oldest friends, Susan, colleagues for whom she had endless respect, Dee and Kaz, and many of the friends and family members who deserve honorable mentions. We are eternally indebted to what you've done for us.
We also want to speak to the long line of women from which Kim originates and from which we know Kim derived a lot of her courage and convictions throughout and at the end of her life. Starting with her grandmother, Irene Martyn, commonly referred to as Mother, her mom, KK, or Catherine Martyn, her mother-in-law, Isabel McDougall, who is alive but cannot be with us today, and of course, her stepmother, Elizabeth Martyn, also known as Beautiful Liz.
The medical staff at Sunnybrook, who showed a level of compassion and professionalism which went beyond what we could have hoped for. They did this by staying late, making home visits, and working outside the system to ensure she felt valued as a patient, but most importantly as a person. They not only cared for her physical state, but her emotional health as well. They did this by fostering trust and love, which made her journey with cancer bearable. During the 28 years Kim lived at 87 Ferrier, we were surrounded by incredible neighbors, and we were assured knowing help was only a house away when we couldn't be there with Kim. That comfort is immeasurable.
We also think we should give mention to our dear family friend, Howard Evans, Dr. Howard Evans. He's been with our family through Bruce's journey with cancer as well as Kim's until the very last hours of her life. and her death wouldn't have been as peaceful as it was without him. Thank you, Howard.
At memorials, people usually focus on talking about their loved one's life. However, Kim's death is a reflection of how she lived, and we think it's important to tell you about it.
Prior to 2016, Kim joined a group called Dying with Dignity, which provided resources for individuals who are seeking MAID, medical assistance in dying, despite it not yet being legal in Canada. She talked with friends and family and even organized an information session about this group and the important work they do.
By the time MAID was legalized in Canada, Kim's disease had progressed, so she decided to go ahead and sign the consent forms with her palliative care team. She then invited Kendra and I to meet on a monthly basis for what we would call living and dying dinners, or L&D dinners. These dinners were intended to help us process the emotional and the practical and spiritual implications of her decision to pursue this option. Kim was even invited by her palliative care doctor to participate in a podcast produced for medical professionals regarding the patient experience of MAID. The podcast is called About Empathy, and her episode, which is the season premiere, will air this fall.
Now we'd like to share a couple of short examples of our experiences as Kim's daughters. The action of love was so important to Kim, and she had a profound impact on the course of my life through her acts of loving kindness. She never shied away from difficult, uncomfortable conversations. In fact, I think she, like her father, sometimes preferred them to everyday niceties. During the past 6 years, her support in identifying and addressing my addictions issues has had an immeasurable impact on my life, and I feel like her willingness to foster a non-judgmental and loving space has allowed me to grow into the person I am now. Without her, I would be lost.
For me, Kim was my home. I still remember the horror I experienced when she and Bruce had to explain to me that one day I may want to move out of their house and start my own family. This wasn't too long ago. One of Kim's many talents was giving people the space to grow, and that's what she did for me. Without judgment, she gently encouraged me to seek my own adventures. 6 months ago, Dee and I started a new adventure. And like always, Kim was beside us the entire time, offering words of wisdom, practical advice, and just bursting with love. It breaks my heart that she will not physically be with us to greet her grandchild, but her years of support have prepared me for this adventure, and she will always be with us.
To conclude, we'd like to share something Bruce wrote to Kim. The day after my mom died, we discovered a letter from him addressed to her, and we want to share it. His poignant words truly capture our feelings of loss, gratitude, and hope.
So there wasn't a date on this card, but we think it was probably in the 70s by the design. So my dad wrote, "Dear Kim, the child in me remembers the first time you went away and many of the feelings of being lost. But unlike the first, I have no fear of you leaving for a journey I can never join you on. I am excited and full of hope for this new adventure of yours. And if I'm not so merry, you'll know it's because I'm missing you already. Love, Bruce." We grieve the loss of our parents, and we take comfort in the thought that they are reunited. Thank you.
Bruce be proud. I didn't have the opportunity to meet Bruce before his passing, but I know him. I know him. And I think for some of you maybe that didn't know Kim so well before you came in these doors, I think you probably know her a little bit deeper, and that's a beautiful thing that will stay with us. So lastly, our final words are from Nation Chiang, colleague and friend of Kim's late husband, Bruce McDougall. Nation has become a consigliere of sorts to the Martyn McDougall clan. Bruce's memorial, Nathan, Kenneth, and Kwanzaa drummed for Bruce, and in honor of Nation's friendship and love for Kim, these men will do the same now at the end of Nation's words. Nation's final words and drumming will then bring the formal part of this memorial to a close. Following this, please feel free to stick around until 8, share stories about Kim with us, and share stories about Kim with each other, share some laughs, share some tears, have some food, have some wine, we all need it, and just, this is Kim, this is how Kim ran her life. This unorthodox approach is how she did things. So yeah, please celebrate her with us.
Thank you. Just before I say a few words about my friend Kim, I've just got a few song lyrics here, which is one of Kim's favorite songs, and I'm going to solicit your help to sing it. You don't have to hold on, you don't have to be, certainly don't have to be in harmony, but do your best. And when you see the lyrics, I hope you'll appreciate it. We'll walk through it slowly, but to raise one voice on this song that made her laugh so much, I think would bring great joy and would put a wind in her sails and open heaven's gates for her. So share this out. There aren't any enough for everybody, so So as those go around, and as I've listened to the stories today, I can only hear Kim's voice in my mind. And all I can hear is, oh, for God's sake. I mean, really, those are the things. Exasperations, expressions of a friend that I would say knew love. And not love in the superficial way that we often think of love. Not love just for nostalgia's sake, but as many have testified in their stories, as Emma and Kendra embody in their grace of leading with thanks for those who have been around, that Kim lived love. She acted love. She didn't talk about love as much as she exemplified it. And that love was not always soft. That love was not always gentle. According to some of the stories Kendra's told, it has many expressions. But at the core of it, there's an honesty you can count on. Whether you agree or not, you can count on Kim showing up. You can count on Kim stepping into conversations that folks often shy away from, or indeed pushing for those conversations. And not for the purposes of just being provocative, because she was a hungry learner. There was something inside Kim about self-actualizing truth. And that truth has evolved for those who have journeyed with her, from jumping out and scaring you throughout your life, to your adventures in Ryerson, and the stories from childhood to now have a common thread about a woman who was bold, who may not have had her voice at one point, but found it along the way and graced us with the wisdom, the insights, and the acts of love that she committed herself to day to day. My family, my partner Fanny, my son Taino, my daughter Kasha, who we often would take, Kim and I would often take walks to the beach and talk about the fact that we think Kasha and Kendra were cut from the same stardust because they seemed to be going through the same journey and sounded exactly the same. There were times when I would close my eyes and be like, is that Kendra or Kasha? I'm not sure. And I will treasure those memories of sunsetting walks in a park, talking about dance and music, about love, about true love, and what it means to act love, and how you bring love to your last breath. We're going to play some music. The song in front of you is one of the favorites. Kim was part of a drum group, as you heard earlier, and one of the songs that gave her great joy, while I had the great joy of watching her playing the drum, next like this, veins popping, and I had to keep saying, Kim, breathe, breathe, breathe. Somebody help Kim breathe. She was so determined to get it right, and she brought a great deal of joy and laughter and sense of community and family to that group that we were all part of. Consistently a teacher, consistently a busybody, consistently up in people's business, but in the most loving and kind way that is Kim. So the song in front of you, I don't have the lyrics in front of you. I'll give you a bit of the melody. I just would like just a cappella, and then we're going to play some music, and then we'll close it, right? So the song goes, drunk and disorderly, always in custody, friends and my family, all them fed up with me, cause I'm drunk and disorderly. Every week I in the jail, drunk and disorderly, nobody to stand me bail. I can't stop, Lord, and I won't try. I feel so good when I hide. So bring wine, bring beer, bring gin, bring champagne, ink, anything. Nighttime, better in the sunshine. Anytime is right time to drink me high wine until I get drunk and disorderly. Always